All right, let's talk about some pricing definitions and some basic pricing formulas. Here are the formulas that your book talks about and that I think are critical for any business student to understand, especially if you are responsible for setting price. So let's start with profit. Profit is revenues minus cost. That is all the money that the business brings in minus all the costs associated with that business. Revenues themselves are the price that you charge times the number of units sold. That is all of the money that you bring in. Costs are both fixed costs that are incurred no matter how many units you sell, and variable costs, which are costs that vary depending on the number of units sold. Oftentimes, variable costs are also called cost per units or cost of goods sold. Variable costs equal then the cost per unit times the number of units sold, and profit then is the price times the number of units sold, that is revenue, minus total cost, which is cost per units times the number of units sold minus fixed costs. The margin is the price that you charge minus the variable cost or cost per unit or cost of goods sold per unit. And then the break-even point is when revenues equal costs. And so the break-even point or the break-even quantity is the quantity is when the number of units. So the break-even quantity is the fixed cost divided by the margin, that is price minus cost of goods sold. That determines the break-even point or quantity. So let's go through an example for each one of these. Quickly for profit then. Last month, Jack's House of Dogs restaurant had a total revenues of $12,500 and total cost, that is all bills to be paid, of $11,100. What was their profit? Well, of course, the profit is revenues minus cost, so it would be $12,500 minus $11,100 or $1,400. Revenues. Well, last month, Jack's driving range sold 2,200 buckets of golf balls at $12 each. How much was their revenue? Well, the revenues are the price that they charge times the number of units sold, or in this case, $26,400. Last month, Jack's food truck paid $12,000 in fixed costs for such things as payment on the truck, insurance, and Jack's salary, plus $10,500 in variable costs, most of which were food to make the various menu items. So how much was Jack's total cost last month? Well, total costs are fixed costs plus variable costs, or in this case, $22,500. The American Marketing Association buys t-shirts for $10 a piece from a local merchant and sells them on their website for $15 a piece. Last year, they sold 175 t-shirts. What was their total variable cost? Well, the variable cost is the cost per unit times the number of units sold. And so in this case, since each unit cost $10 and they sold 175, their total variable costs were $1,750. The American Marketing Association buys t-shirts for $10 and sells them for $15 a piece. Last year they sold 175 t-shirts. Their e-commerce website cost them $125 a year to operate. What was their profit on their t-shirt business? Well, once again, profits are revenues minus total costs, both variable and fixed costs. So in this case, their revenues were $2,625. That's $15 a piece times 175 t-shirts, minus their variable costs, $1,750, minus their fixed costs, in this case for their website, of $120. So their total profits were $750. Margin or profit margin. The American Marketing Association buys t-shirts for $10 and sells them for $15 a piece. And so what's the profit margin? The profit margin is the price that they charge minus the variable cost or the cost per unit. In this case, it's $15 minus the $10. And so their profit margin or their margin is $5 per shirt. That is, the UNLV AMA makes $5 for every shirt they sell in terms of profit. Now, the American Marketing Association, so what about the break-even quantity? Well, the break-even quantity is the fixed cost divided by the margin. So in this case, their fixed costs were $120 for the e-commerce site, and their margin is $5. That is the $15 they sell the shirts for minus the $10 they pay for each shirt. So what's their break-even point? 24 shirts. Now, let's talk a little bit about the nature and the importance of price. All right. So one of the ideas about price is the concept of value to the consumer. For any particular item that a person might want to purchase, there is a value, and the value is the perceived benefits of the product divided by the price. Okay, and so it's a comparison of perceived benefits by price. And we tend to buy products that we think have the highest value. That is, the most perceived benefits divided by the price. And so, for instance, if we go to the store and we look for a shirt, and we see two shirts, and one shirt we like a little bit better than the other, but that shirt costs $30 more, well, the argument might be that the shirt we don't like quite as much, or we don't perceive to have as many benefits, might be a better value because it is nearly the same in terms of perceived benefits, but has a much lower price. And so when we think about value for a consumer, we are worried about the perceived benefits on one end and the price on the other. So how do you increase value for a customer? Because that's what marketing is really all about, right? Having the most value for your customer. Well, there are two ways that I can increase value for a customer. I can improve the perceived benefits. That is, I can actually have actual improvements to the product, make the product better, or I can try to convince customers that my product has more benefits than other products. And so this goes back to the notion then of advertising and communication strategy. The other approach is I can try to lower the price, and that would be either lowering the cash price or lowering other costs. For instance, one of the costs might be having to go to the store to pick it up, where if I just buy it on Amazon, somebody delivers it directly to me. And of course, if you have Amazon Prime and students get a discount of 50% off on Amazon Prime, it turns out that the delivery cost is $0. Some other aspects of price. Understand that customers use price as a surrogate for quality. All right, this is important for positioning. All right, and so if you think about saying, well, we have the best. Ours is the best golf course in town. Well, if mine is the best golf course in town, the price should reflect that. And so you can't say I have the best golf course in town and then charge the lowest rate, because for customers who don't know anything else about the golf course, they get some sort of a notion of how good the golf course is by price. And so price is often used as a surrogate for quality, especially for consumers who have limited knowledge of the actual perceived benefits. The second aspect of pricing is this notion of reference prices. Okay, and a reference price is a price that people think is just right. And one example of this is how much should a prime rib dinner cost? So we say, well, a prime rib dinner in Las Vegas ought to be about $25. So you're driving down Boulder Highway and you drive past the Longhorn Casino, and the Longhorn Casino has prime rib dinner $6.95. And one of two things can happen. Either you can say that's a great buy and I ought to stop and get that prime rib dinner, or you might say what? Well, you might say, geez, that price is so low, it must not be a very good prime rib dinner. There must be something wrong with it. Maybe it's made out of, kangaroo meat or something. And another good example of this is you get ready to sell a car. You've got a used car, you're trying to get rid of it. So you put an ad in the paper, and it's an automobile that used car that would ordinarily sell for $10,000. You just want to get rid of it, so you put in a price of $5,000, hoping that someone will come right along and buy it almost immediately. So every time you answer the phone, someone asks you about the car, the first question that they ask you is, well, if you're only charging $5,000 for it, what's wrong with it? And you say nothing, and of course they think what? Well, must be something wrong with it, otherwise you'd be charging more money for it. So this concept of what a reference price is what the customer expects the price to be, is their reference price. If you put your price too high above that reference price, what happens is people won't buy the product. And if you put the price too low below the reference price, customers get suspicious and typically also won't buy the product.